Chapter 1 A Shot in the Night. How good it is to be on holiday with my daughter, thought Detective David Miller. He was happy to be away from his job and the city of Leeds in the north of England for a few days. His work was very important to him, but he also cherished the time he could spend with his daughter, Sarah. A week in Kent, on the southeast coast, promised to be enjoyable for both of them. "Drive a little slower, Dad," said Sarah. "You are not driving a police car now. I would like to enjoy the view. It is so beautiful." They were driving along the coast road between Folkestone and Hastings, and there was a beautiful view of the sea. "Okay," said her father. "We have a few hours yet. We must arrive in time for the evening meal, though." They were quiet for a few minutes, and then he spoke again. "I am so pleased that you have come on holiday with me," he said. "There are not many 24-year-old daughters who want to go on holiday with their fathers." "No," she laughed. "You really are very lucky to have me with you." He laughed as well. "Yes, I know I am. It is so long since we spent some time together. I think that the last time was 2 years ago, when we went on that Aikido course in Birmingham. I am sorry that I always seem to be so busy." "Do not worry about it, Dad," she replied. "It makes the time that we do spend together really special." "Thanks," he answered. "I am really looking forward to this week, especially the open-air classical concert at Leeds Castle. That should be really good." "Yes," she agreed. "The 1812 overture with real cannons and fireworks should be amazing." After a moment, she asked, "Do you know why it is called Leeds Castle? It cannot be anything to do with the city of Leeds where we live, can it?" "No," replied her father. "It is not. I read somewhere that the Saxons called the area Esselds. Over the years it became Leeds." "You are so clever, Dad," said Sarah proudly. "Sometimes I think that you know everything." Detective Miller smiled but said nothing. Sarah looked at her father. He was 47 years old, but he looked younger. His brown hair had some gray at the sides. "He is not handsome," she thought, "but he is good-looking. He is also still a fit man." They used to do Aikido together, but now her father practiced yoga. 20 minutes later, they drove past St. Mary's Bay and after a few hundred meters saw a sign at the side of the road. "Little Stone Farm, bed and breakfast," read Sarah. "That is it." David Miller turned left down a narrow lane. He drove slowly as the road was uneven. After a few minutes, they arrived in the yard of a small farm. There was a house with a thatched roof, and a barn stood at the end of the yard. David parked his car at the side of it. They both climbed out of the car and stretched. A dog was barking, and as they turned towards the house, the door opened. A man dressed in old jeans and a dirty blue shirt stood in the doorway. He was about 40 years old, small and wiry, with brown hair. As they approached, Sarah could see that his eyes were a beautiful blue. "Good afternoon," he said. "Mr. Miller, is it?" He held out a grubby hand. "I am Alan Croft." They shook hands. "And you must be Sarah," he said as he turned towards her. She shook his hand reluctantly because she did not like the fact that it was dirty. "Come inside," he said. "Brenda will make you a cup of tea, and then you can bring in your cases and unpack." They followed him into the house. "How was your journey here?" he asked. He did not wait for an answer but called, "Brenda, Mr. Miller and his daughter are here." David and Sarah walked behind him down the hall and into the living room. There were 2 large sofas, a television, a dining table with 6 chairs, and other pieces of furniture. Sarah was surprised to see that the room was clean and tidy. Not like Mr. Croft, she thought. Brenda appeared from the kitchen. She looked a little older than Mr. Croft and was also a few inches taller. She was quite large and had a round face with red cheeks. She wiped her hands on a towel before she shook their hands. "I am just making the evening meal," she said. "I hope you like meat and potato pie." "Yes, that will be fine, Mrs. Croft," said David. Sarah used to be a vegetarian, but she started to eat meat again last year. "Please call me Brenda, Mr. Miller," she said. "Well, I'm sure you will enjoy my pie, Sarah. Everyone does." Now, sit down and I will bring you both a nice cup of tea. You must be ready for a drink after driving all that way. She went back into the kitchen, and Mr. Croft followed her. I wish that my mother and father were still together, thought Sarah. David Miller had been in the police for 25 years. 12 years ago, he became a detective, and 2 years later, her mother left him because he was never at home. He was always working. Since then, Sarah had lived with her mother. I love them both, she thought. Sometimes life is so difficult. They sat on the sofa and looked around at the pictures on the walls. What do you think so far? Asked the detective. Well, it is not the Ritz, but it seems okay, replied Sarah. Mr. Croft looks a bit grubby, though. I am glad he is not cooking our evening meal. They both laughed. Just then, Mr. Croft came through the kitchen door. Behind him was Mrs. Croft with a tray in her hands. She placed the cups and teapot on the table. Did you have a good journey here? She asked as she poured the tea. Yes, thank you, answered David. Unlike Mr. Croft, Mrs. Croft waited for an answer. When they all had a cup of tea, Mr. Croft asked, "What job do you do, Mr. Miller?" "Please call me David," replied David. "I work in a bank." The same as Sarah, he lied. When he was on holiday, he never told people that he was a policeman. People always wanted to talk about police work or complain about the police. Is this actually a farm, or do you just have the bed and breakfast business? He asked. The only animal we have here is a dog, replied Mrs. Croft. I run the bed and breakfast. Alan has a large van. He carries things about for people. It brings in a little extra money. What kind of dog do you have? Asked Sarah. I like dogs. I do not think you would like Brutus, said Mrs. Croft. He is a large Rottweiler, and he is not very friendly. We keep him locked in the backyard when we have visitors. They continued talking until they had finished their tea. Then Mr. Croft helped David to bring in the suitcases from the car. He took them up to their rooms. Both rooms were at the front of the house and looked out onto the yard. In each room was a single bed, a wardrobe with drawers, and a chair. Each room also had an ensuite bathroom with a shower. If you want to go for a walk before dinner, the beach is not far from here, said Mr. Croft. If you go down the path between the house and the barn, you will arrive at the seed in 20 minutes. Thanks, answered David. It would be nice to go for a walk. My legs are stiff after the journey from Leeds. David unpacked his case and hung his clothes in the old wooden wardrobe. After a hot shower, he felt refreshed. When he was dressed in blue jeans, a blue short-sleeved shirt, and a leather jacket, he knocked on Sarah's door. She was still in the shower, however. Just like her mother, he thought to himself and smiled. She used to take hours to get herself ready to go out. He went down into the living room to wait for her. He looked up from the newspaper that he was reading when Sarah eventually came down the stairs. She was also wearing blue jeans, but she had on a yellow t-shirt. Her long blonde hair was tied back in a ponytail. "Are you sure that you will be warm enough?" asked her father. "It may be windy down by the sea. Of course I will be warm enough, Dad. You worry too much," she laughed. They left the house and followed the path between the house and the barn. It went through fields and a small wood. When they came out of the wood, they could see the sea. "Oh, the English Channel," said Sarah. "Can you see France?" "I can see something," replied her father, "but it is probably just a low cloud." They walked on in the evening sunlight to the top of the cliff. Then they stopped for a moment to look at the sea and watch the large ships out on the water. "Shall we go down to the beach?" asked Sarah and began to go down the steep path. David followed her carefully. "Not too fast," he called. "My legs are older than yours." They spent some time on the beach, where they walked by the sea and threw pebbles into the water. Then they climbed back up the path. "You are very quiet, Dad," said Sarah. "Is anything the matter?" "Not really," he replied. "I was just thinking that the path from the farm is very easy to follow. It looks as though lots of people use it." I think that is strange when there are only a few guests each week. He bent and picked up a cigarette packet from the ground. French cigarettes, he said. Perhaps they have had French guests. Really, Dad, laughed Sarah. Do you ever stop being a detective? I have a friend who smokes Russian cigarettes, and she is not Russian. They made their way back to the farm, and as they entered the yard, they saw that a large new BMW was parked in front of the barn. As they went into the house, Mrs. Croft was serving the evening meal. There was already a man sitting at the dining table. "Hello, you two," called Mrs. Croft. "You are just in time. This is Mr. Evans. He is staying here for the night." David and Sarah introduced themselves to Mr. Evans. He was about 30 years of age, slim, and had short blonde hair. He was dressed in an expensive suit, and the detective saw that he had a Rolex watch on his wrist. Sarah thought he was quite good-looking, and during the meal, she tried to talk to him. Mr. Evans, however, did not want to talk. He answered her questions with yes or no, and eventually, she gave up and talked to her father instead. After the meal, Mr. Evans went upstairs to his room. Mrs. Croft cleared the table and returned to the kitchen. "Mr. Evans does not say very much, does he?" said Sarah when they were alone. "No," replied her father. "He did not want to talk about himself, did he? I wonder what his job is." That was a very expensive Rolex that he had on his wrist, and new BMWs are not cheap. "Well, I do not think we are going to find out," said Sarah. Mrs. Croft said that he is only here for one night. They sat on the sofa. Sarah watched the television, and David read a book that he had brought with him. At 9 p.m., Mrs. Croft made a cup of tea for them, and at 10 p.m. they decided to go to bed. They were both tired after the journey. David lay awake for a little while. He thought about what they would do in the morning. He also thought about Mr. Evans. Why is a man with so much money at a bed and breakfast? He should be in a 4-star hotel, thought David as he fell asleep. It was still dark when he suddenly woke up. He was sure that the noise that woke him was a gunshot. He switched on the lamp at the side of his bed and looked at the clock. 3:30. He switched off the lamp again and got out of bed. He looked out of his window, but the yard below was completely black. Since he was awake, he decided to get up and have a look outside. He put on his trousers, shoes, and a jumper and quietly went down the stairs. He unlocked and opened the front door. Suddenly, the light in the hall was switched on. "It is a little early to be going out for a walk, is it not, Mr. Miller?" said a voice behind him. David's heart was beating like a drum. He turned and saw that Mr. Croft had come out of the living room. Behind him stood a large black Rottweiler. The dog growled deeply when David looked at it. "Be quiet, Brutus," said Croft. The dog stopped growling, but it did not take its eyes off David. "Something woke me," said the detective. "It sounded like a gunshot." "Yes, I heard it too," said Mr. Croft. "I was in the living room. I must have fallen asleep while I was watching the television." "What do you think it was?" asked David. "It is probably poachers," replied Croft. "They are often around here at night. Do not go out when they are about. You could be injured or even killed. You would not be the first person to be killed by a poacher's bullet." "No," he replied. "You are probably right. I think I will go back to bed and see if I can sleep." David started to climb the stairs and then turned to look back. Mr. Croft had returned to the lounge, but Brutus was standing there watching him with cold, black eyes. Chapter 2. Blood on the Ground. At breakfast that morning, only Sarah and her father were at the table. "Where is Mr. Evans?" asked Sarah when Mrs. Croft came from the kitchen. "Oh, he was up very early," she replied. "He had to catch a ferry to France. He needed to be in Paris for a meeting this morning." "Why did not he fly?" asked the detective. "He needed his car with him," replied Mrs. Croft quickly, and her cheeks began to redden. "Now, what can I get you for breakfast?" "A full English breakfast for me," said the detective. "Could I have a fried egg, please, and for me, 2 poached eggs on toast, please, said Sarah. When Mrs. Croft returned to the kitchen, they both looked at each other. It is strange that Mr. Evans left so early for the ferry. If he needed his car in Paris, he could have gone on the Eurotunnel train with it, said the detective. Perhaps he likes to drive, Sarah replied. He left early. I heard his car in the yard when it was still dark. It woke me. I did not hear that, said her father, but I did hear something else. He then told her about the shot that he heard in the night. Really? Gasped Sarah. You do not think that had anything to do with Mr. Evans leaving early, do you? I hope not, answered her father. And Mr. Croft said it was poachers, Sarah continued. That is terrible. I hate to think that people go around with guns and kill poor animals in the middle of the night. The world would be a better place without guns. They stopped talking as Mrs. Croft returned from the kitchen. She placed a plate in front of the detective. Here is your full English breakfast, David, she said. And here are your poached eggs on toast, Sarah. I hope they are not too hard, she added as she put a plate in front of Sarah. That smells delicious, said the detective as he looked at his plate full of food: 2 eggs, bacon, mushrooms, beans, and fried bread. I will need a long walk after this, he continued. After a week here, I will be fat. Your cooking is really excellent, Brenda. She smiled and went back into the kitchen. A few seconds later, she appeared again with a pot of tea. She placed it on the table and then left them alone. David and Sarah ate their breakfast. They discussed how they would spend their day. It was a beautiful morning with a blue sky and warm sunshine. They decided to visit Canterbury, as they had never been there. They would both like to see the famous cathedral. When Mrs. Croft returned to clear the table, they talked with her about Canterbury. Finally, David asked where Mr. Croft was. He had to leave early as well, she replied. He is gone up to London to see someone about some business. Before he could ask anything else, Mrs. Croft hurried off into the kitchen. Sarah and her father went upstairs to their rooms and packed a small rucksack each. Sarah went out into the yard and saw her father near the barn door. As she walked towards him, she slipped. She looked down and saw a small pool of red liquid. She bent down to look at it, and her father came over to her. What is it, Dad? She asked. It looks like blood to me. Her father put his finger into the liquid and examined it. I think you are right, he said. What is a pool of blood doing here in the yard? Brutus caught a rabbit this morning and brought it into the yard, said Mrs. Croft. She was standing behind them with a bucket of water. I am sorry that you had to see that, she continued. I was going to clean it up earlier, but I was busy in the kitchen. She poured the water onto the blood to wash it away. When she was happy that all of the blood had disappeared, she went back into the house. Sarah and her father stood in silence. They looked at each other, and he shrugged his shoulders. I thought they locked Brutus in the backyard, Sarah said. That is what Mrs. Croft said yesterday. Agreed, her father replied. Perhaps the poachers are not the only killers around here after dark. I do not like to think that Brutus is walking about freely at night. Oh, do not think about it then, said Sarah. Let us go and have a nice day in Canterbury. They spent a pleasant day in Canterbury. They visited the castle and the cathedral, and they had lunch at one of the cafes in the town centre. They also looked around the shops before they returned to their car and drove back to Little Stone Farm. On their return, Mr. Croft was standing at the door of the house. Did you have a good time in Canterbury? He asked. Yes, we did. Thanks, replied David. How was London? Too busy and too noisy, Croft laughed. Did you drive there? Asked the detective. Yes, Croft answered cautiously. Why, it is just that your van was still in the barn this morning, answered David. The smile disappeared from Croft's face, and his cold blue eyes turned towards David. I walked to the end of the lane, and a friend took me in his car, he said after a moment. Oh, right, replied David. Any more questions? He asked sharply. No, Alan, answered the detective. None at all. Croft turned and disappeared into the house. Sarah and the detective looked at each other before they followed him through the door. They went upstairs to their rooms to wash before the evening meal. Tonight, they were the only two at the table. While they ate, Sarah and the detective discussed their day in Canterbury, but both of them were thinking about the strange things that had happened since they arrived at Little Stone Farm. Mrs. Croft served their food, but did not say much this evening. Mr. Croft was nowhere to be seen. After the meal, Sarah watched TV again while her father read his book. When they went upstairs, they both went into Sarah's room. "Something is not right here," said David after she had closed the door. "I think I will stay awake tonight and see if anything happens." "Oh, Dad," said Sarah, "you are not at work now. Just go to bed." "Sorry, Sarah," he replied. "I have a suspicious mind. I just want to see if anything happens during the night here." "Well, be careful, Dad," Sarah warned. "There are obviously people out there at night with guns." "Do not worry, I can take care of myself," said her father before he went to his room. He took off his shoes and lay on the bed. He set his alarm clock for 2 a.m. and then closed his eyes. He only seemed to have slept for seconds when the alarm woke him. After he stopped the alarm, he lay for a few minutes on the bed. Then he got up, went to the open window, and looked out. The yard was completely dark, and there was no sound at all. He sat by the window, and the hours went by. The only sounds he heard were a dog barking somewhere and also an owl in the wood. When it started to become light, he undressed and got into bed, where he soon fell asleep. At breakfast the next morning, he told Sarah about his night. "Perhaps you are too suspicious, Dad," she said. "I think it is the fact that you are a policeman that makes you suspect everyone." "Do you not think you could be right?" her father agreed. "I think that I should leave my work behind for a week and just enjoy my holiday. The weather is beautiful and the food is great, and of course, the company is wonderful," Sarah added, and she laughed. "Indeed it is," agreed her father, and he laughed too. They spent the day in Ramsgate on the coast. It was some distance away, but David had a holiday there when he was a teenager and wanted to go back. He found that he could not really remember much. Everything was more modern now. However, they had a pleasant day. They did all the things that David used to do when he was a teenager on holiday. They walked by the sea, ate fish and chips, and went to the fairground. They went on the rides, and at one of the stalls, David won a bar of chocolate by throwing darts. They had both eaten enough, so he put it in his pocket for later. For Sarah, it was a new experience. She had spent all her holidays in Spain or France. She had never had a holiday on the coast in England. When they arrived back at Little Stone Farm, Mr. Croft was in the barn. The doors were open, and they could see him in the back of his van. He had a bucket and a cloth. He looked up as they got out of the car. They were both laughing. "You have obviously had a good day," he said. "It must be nice to have no work to do." "It is very nice indeed," replied David. "Are you going out with the van this evening, Alan?" "No," Croft answered sharply. "I just thought that I should clean it out. Then it will be ready when I need it again." He turned away and began to clean the floor. David looked at Sarah and shrugged his shoulders. They walked across the yard and into the house. Mrs. Croft was obviously in the kitchen, and the smell of the evening meal filled the hall. "It smells like roast lamb," said Sarah. "The meals here really are delicious. I can hardly believe that you used to be a vegetarian," her father laughed. Apparently, they were still the only guests at the house. While they ate their evening meal, they talked together. They also spoke to Mrs. Croft when she appeared from the kitchen to serve the food. They told her about their visit to Ramsgate and David's holiday there years ago. When they had eaten, they decided to sit in the garden to drink their coffee. It was a beautiful evening, and they watched the sun disappear behind the wood. "2 days gone already," said Sarah. "I cannot believe how quickly the time goes by." "Yes, it will soon be time to pack our cases," replied her father. "Well, Mrs. Croft is okay, and I really like her meals," said Sarah. but I'm not sure about Mr. Croft. Sometimes I think he is okay, and at other times I feel that there is something suspicious about him. I think that we both agree on that." The detective laughed. Then he continued more seriously, "You know what I said this morning about forgetting police work for a week? Well, I still think Mr. Croft is doing something illegal. I think I might stay awake again tonight." "Well, I think that you should go to sleep tonight. You have been yawning all day today," said Sarah. They went inside and watched television together for an hour. Then they went up to their rooms. "Are you really going to stay awake tonight, Dad?" Sarah asked as she went into her room. "I do not know," replied her father. "As you said, I should really sleep tonight. I might set my alarm and just get up for a short time to see if anything is happening." Sarah smiled. She knew that her father would get up during the night. He had been a detective for too many years now. If he thought there was something suspicious going on, then he would not be able to get a good night's sleep. "Good night, Dad," she smiled. "Sleep well." At 2 a.m., David was waiting by his open window. He sat there for 30 minutes, and once again, the only sounds that he heard were the barking of the dog and the call of the owl. He was about to go back to bed when he heard someone swear quietly. He put his head out of the window, but everything was quiet again. With his head out of the window, he could see that there was a light on in the barn. "Perhaps Croft is working on his van," he thought. However, there was no sound at all. He thought for a few seconds and then decided to go and see what was happening in the barn. Probably Croft did not switch the light off, the detective told himself. He went quietly down the stairs. The house was dark and silent. He was just about to open the door and go out into the yard when he heard a deep growl behind him. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. The detective did not move his body, but slowly turned his head. In the darkness, he could see the shape of Brutus. The Rottweiler was standing in the hall behind him. Brutus growled again and took a step towards him. "Good dog," said the detective quietly. "Nice dog." Although it was dark, he could see that the dog was ready to jump at him. He put his hand in his pocket to see if he had anything to protect himself with. His fingers touched the bar of chocolate that he won at the fairground. Quickly, he broke a piece from the bar and threw it to the dog. "Good dog. Do you like chocolate?" he said. In the darkness, he could see the dog take the chocolate from the floor and swallow it quickly. His hand was trembling as he threw another piece to it, and then another. While the dog was eating the chocolate, David opened the door and escaped into the yard. He quickly closed the door behind him and stood still for a moment. He breathed deeply and waited a few minutes until his heart was beating more slowly. "Perhaps I should have stayed in bed," he told himself. "How can I go back into the house now? Brutus will be waiting for me. If there is nothing in the barn, I will have to sleep in there until the Crofts get up, and then I will have to explain why I was out in the yard in the middle of the night." Nevertheless, David wanted to find out what went on in the barn. In the yard, there was only his car. The light was still on in the barn. He stood for a moment and listened. He could now hear noises which came from the barn. It sounded like voices, like someone talking, but very quietly. He walked across the yard and went to the side of the barn where there was a window. With his hand, he cleaned the years of dirt from the glass until it was cleaner and he could see through it. Then he put his face against the window and looked into the barn. At first, he could only see Croft's van. Then he saw someone moving in the corner of the barn. As they walked into the light, he gasped. "So that is Croft's secret," he said to himself, and he took out his mobile phone to call the police. At that moment, he heard a deep growl behind him. Before he could do anything, something hit him on the back of the head, and he fell to the ground unconscious. Chapter 3. Death waits at the bedroom door. Up in her room, Sarah could not sleep. Perhaps it was the cheese that she ate at the evening meal. She woke up several times and lay in bed listening to the owl in the wood. Then she heard a sound on the stairs. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She climbed out of bed and slowly and quietly opened her door. She saw her father going carefully down the stairs and into the hall. She did not want to speak as she might wake the Crofts. She gently closed her door again and sat on the bed. "What should I do?" she thought to herself. "What has Dad seen? Should I follow him, or should I stay in my room?" Finally, Sarah decided to get dressed but to stay in her room and wait to see if anything happened. Dressed in jeans and a jumper, she sat by her window and looked out onto the dark, silent yard. The night air was cool and she was glad that she had put on a jumper. After a few moments, she heard the front door open. It was then gently closed, and she saw a figure cautiously cross the yard towards the barn. She was sure that it was her father, but what had he been doing downstairs? It had taken him a long time to leave the house. The figure went down the side of the barn and disappeared from her view. Sarah still did not know what to do. What if her father did not come back? How long should she wait before she went to look for him? A few moments passed, and she heard the sound of the front door closing again. Now she saw another figure cross the yard. Again, Sarah's heart began to beat faster. It was Mrs. Croft, and she had Brutus by her side. They both crossed the yard without making a sound and went down the side of the barn where her father went only moments before. "Oh no," she thought. "What do I do now?" She was feeling frightened, and her heart was now beating like a drum. David opened his eyes and saw that he was inside the barn. He was sitting on a chair. When he tried to move, he found that his hands were tied behind him and his feet were tied to the chair. Also, a piece of cloth had been pushed into his mouth. His head hurt, and for a few moments he was not sure what happened. The last thing he remembered was looking through the window into the barn. He looked around him. He saw again the group of men, all of them black, that he saw through the window. They looked like Africans. The men were sitting around on the floor of the barn. Most of them looked tired and frightened. Each of them had a rucksack. At that moment, Mr. Croft appeared from behind the van. He looked across at David. "Ah, Mr. Miller, I see that you are awake," he said. "I knew that you would be a problem from the moment you arrived. Always asking questions, always looking where you should not be looking. And you see what has happened now. I will have to kill you." David tried to answer, but he could not speak because of the cloth in his mouth. Croft came across to him and pulled it out. The Africans watched in silence. David breathed deeply before he spoke. "You do not have to kill me. I will not say anything. I know that you are bringing illegal immigrants into the country, but that is not as serious as murder. Do not be stupid. If I disappear, my daughter will go to the police." "Your daughter will not be able to go to the police," said Croft in a very unfriendly tone of voice. "She will be dead as well." "No," pleaded David. "Not Sarah." "Yes," replied Croft. "My wife has just gone to fetch her from her room." He began to smile. "She is a very attractive girl, your daughter. If Mrs. Croft was not here, I could have some fun with her." "You animal," growled David and struggled in the chair, but he could not break the wire which was around his wrists and ankles. "You will not get away with this." Croft grabbed the detective's head and pushed the cloth back in his mouth. "Oh, I think we will, Mr. Miller," he replied. "This is our last job. We have been doing this for 3 years now. It seems that everyone wants to come to England. Most nights of the week, a group of immigrants come across by boat from France. We meet them on the beach and bring them here. We give them a drink and a sandwich and then take them to London in the van. We get £1,000 for each one. Do you know how much money we have now, Mr. Miller?" David just stared silently at him, hate in his eyes. He knew that he could not do anything to stop Croft. "Oh God," he thought, "I cannot even warn Sarah. Well, we have enough to start a new life in another country, somewhere warmer than England. I do not want to work again, ever. I want to spend my time with beautiful girls." He laughed. "Do not tell Mrs. Croft, will you?" As he began to walk away, he added, "Well, I cannot stand here talking all night. There is work to be done. Suddenly, they heard the sound of Brutus barking in the house. Perhaps your daughter is putting up a struggle, laughed Croft. I hope Brutus does not get hold of her. We do not want blood all over the house. He walked to the barn door, opened it slightly, and looked out. Then he returned and spoke to the Africans. In, he said, and pointed to the back of the van. London. The men picked up their rucksacks and began to move towards the van. Some of them looked at the detective tied to the chair, but none of them did anything to help him. Silently, one by one, they climbed into the back of the van. When they were all in, Croft closed the doors. He looked across at David. We do not want too many witnesses, do we, Mr. Miller? He said. Not that we are going to kill you here. We will put you and your daughter in the boot of your car and drive it to London before we shoot you. By the time the police find you and discover who you are, we will be out of the country. As soon as Brenda gets back with your daughter, we can go. David tried to free himself, but the wire was tied too tightly. I will have to wait for the right moment, he thought. Hopefully, I will have an opportunity to escape when they try to put me in the car. For the moment, however, he could only sit, watch, and wait. Sarah also sat, watched, and waited. It was now several minutes since she saw Mrs. Croft and the dog disappear behind the barn. She had heard no sound, and there had been no movement in the yard. She could not decide what she should do. Should she continue to sit and wait? How long should she wait? What if her father did not come back? While she was thinking, the door of the barn opened. In the light from inside, Sarah saw Mrs. Croft come out of the barn and close the door behind her. Brutus was by her side. Perhaps everything is all right, thought Sarah. Dad must have heard her coming. He is probably still behind the barn. She watched Mrs. Croft walk slowly across the cobbled yard and enter the house. For a few moments, there was silence, and then Sarah heard a sound on the stairs. She went to her bedroom door and listened. She could hear the sound of Brutus growling quietly. What if they have done something to Dad, and now they are looking for me? She thought. In a second, they will come in here. She reached for the key, but before she could turn it, the door began to open. In the darkness, she saw a hand holding a pistol appear around the edge of the door. Immediately, Sarah threw herself against the door, closing it hard on the arm holding the gun. There was a scream from outside, and the pistol clattered to the floor. Brutus began to bark loudly. Sarah was now able to close the door, and she pulled the chair over to hold it closed for as long as possible. She picked up the pistol and put it into the belt of her jeans. She did not like to have it with her, but she could not leave it there for Mrs. Croft. Now she had to escape. She knew that she could never shoot Mrs. Croft or Brutus, not even to protect her own life. I could probably overpower Mrs. Croft, she thought, but I certainly cannot fight the dog. All this flew through her mind in an instant. She ran to the open window and climbed out as Mrs. Croft began to hit the door with something heavy. The window to her room and the window to her father's room were side by side. Thank goodness, she gasped as she saw that his window was open. From her window, she was able to climb across to his and into his room. As she stood in his room, she heard the sound of the chair break, and the door to her room opened with a crash. "Kill, Brutus, kill!" screamed Mrs. Croft, and in a moment, Sarah could hear Brutus barking in her room. Quickly, she picked up the heavy lamp from the bedside table and slowly opened the bedroom door. Mrs. Croft was standing outside Sarah's bedroom door and was holding her injured wrist. She was waiting to hear Sarah scream when Brutus had his teeth in her. Silently, Sarah stepped behind her and with all her strength hit her on the back of the head with the lamp. Without a sound, Mrs. Croft fell to the floor, unconscious. Sarah stepped over her body and quickly closed the bedroom door. Brutus was now a prisoner in the room. Sarah breathed deeply, and now that the danger was past, she began to tremble. "I do not know what it is that they are doing here," she said to herself, "but if Mrs. Croft came looking for me with a gun, it must be something illegal." Now she thought about her father. What could have happened to him? She would have to go to the barn and see if she could find him. First, however, she must do something with Mrs. Croft. Sarah quickly checked to see if the woman was still breathing. Luckily, she was. The blow was not hard enough to kill her. Sarah grabbed her by the shoulders and dragged her into her father's room. She used the cable from the table lamp to tie Mrs. Croft's hands together. She then used one of her father's belts to fasten the woman's legs together. Finally, she used another belt. She put it through Mrs. Croft's arms and fastened it around the leg of the bed. When she was happy that Mrs. Croft could not escape, she took the pistol from her belt and looked at it. The smooth, cold metal in her hand made her feel uncomfortable. She placed it back in her belt and carefully went down the stairs. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and listened. Brutus had now stopped barking. The house was in darkness and completely silent. Sally went to the front door and opened it slowly. The yard was dark and there was no sound. "Where is Mr. Croft? Will he come to the house to look for his wife? Hopefully, he is still in the barn." Sarah left the house and closed the door behind her. Quickly, she moved around the edge of the yard until she was at the side of the barn. She stood at the window where her father had stood a short time ago and looked into the barn. She gasped as she saw her father tied to a chair. Mr. Croft was just closing the doors at the back of the van and was speaking to her father. She could not hear what he was saying, but from the look on her father's face, it was not something pleasant. Croft opened the two large barn doors before he climbed into the driver's seat of the van. As Sarah watched, the van moved forward out of the barn and into the yard. "Now is my opportunity," thought Sarah. She took the pistol from her belt and then she opened the side door of the barn. After quickly looking around, she ran across to her father. With the pistol in her hand, she placed it on the floor and threw her arms around him. "Oh, Dad," she gasped. "Are you okay?" All her father could do was mumble. He still had the cloth in his mouth, so she pulled it out. "Behind you," he gasped. Sarah turned, but it was already too late. Croft had silently come back into the barn, and before she could move, he picked up the pistol from the floor. He stepped back away from her and pointed the pistol at her heart. Well, Miss Miller," he said. "What a pleasant surprise. So nice of you to join us." Chapter 4. Croft shoots. Sarah and her father looked at Croft in silence. "Where is my wife?" asked Croft. "In my dad's bedroom," Sarah replied. "She is unconscious, but apart from that, she is okay." "Oh, and I tied her up." "And Brutus?" asked Croft. "I hope you have not injured Brutus." "No, of course not," said Sarah. "He is locked in my bedroom." "You are not just an attractive woman, are you?" continued Croft. "I really have underestimated you. Unfortunately for you, I now have the pistol, and I will not make the same mistake twice." "What are you going to do with us?" asked Sarah. "He is going to kill us," answered David. "The van is full of illegal immigrants from Africa. He brings them into the country every week. Surely it is not worth killing us to protect your illegal little business, is it?" said Sarah. "In a few days, every policeman in England will be looking for you. When they find your bodies, we will be far away," replied Croft. "Anyway, you are not the first to die. What do you think happened to Mr. Evans?" "So the blood in the yard was his?" gasped Sarah. "Yes," answered Croft. "I put him in the boot of his car before I drove it to London. So he was on the ground in the yard for a few minutes. That is where the blood came from. I did not see it in the dark." "But why did you kill him?" asked David. "I cannot stand around here all night talking," growled Croft. "There is work to be done." "That is your last question, Mr. Miller. Evans was our partner. He looked after the immigrants when they arrived in London. He found jobs and rooms for them. Then they had to pay him all the money that they earned. He was richer than we were. A few days ago, Brenda and I decided that we wanted to stop bringing in the immigrants. We are quite rich now and want to enjoy our money. Evans wanted us to continue, but we said that we were leaving. He came here to try to convince us to stay. He even brought a pistol to help convince us. Croft laughed and waved the pistol around. This pistol, in fact, when he threatened me with it, we struggled, and I took it from him. Then I shot him. I knew he would always be a danger for us if I left him alive. He paused a moment and then asked, "So you see, I am already a murderer. I have no choice. I have to kill you both." "You will not get away with it," cried David. "I think I will. Now, Miss Miller, please lie on the floor and put your arms behind your back. I need to tie your hands together." Without taking his eyes from Sarah, he went to the wall of the barn and got some wire. He returned to stand in front of her, the wire in one hand and the pistol in the other. Sarah laughed. "Do you think I am going to make it easy for you? There are several things you do not know about me, Mr. Croft. Firstly, I do not like someone telling me what to do. I am very stubborn. If you do not believe me, ask my dad." The detective sat there with his mouth open. He could not believe how calm his daughter was. She was going to die, and she was talking to Croft as though they were discussing the weather. Croft pointed the pistol at the detective. "Either you do as I say, or your father gets the first bullet," he said. "That is the second thing you do not know about me," answered Sarah. "I hate guns. I would like to see them all destroyed." "Just be quiet and lie on the floor," replied Croft impatiently. "Please let me finish," continued Sarah. "As I said, I hate guns. So although I brought your wife's pistol with me, I took out all the bullets so that no one could use it." As she finished speaking, she began to walk towards Croft. He pointed the pistol directly at her and pulled the trigger. The only sound was a metallic click. A look of anger appeared on his face. He pulled the trigger a second time, only to hear the click again. By now, Sarah was directly in front of him. As he swung the pistol at her head, Sarah moved quickly to the side and slid her hand down his arm. This pulled him off balance. She then began to turn, and as she did, she took hold of his wrist with one hand and grabbed his head with the other. She pulled it against her shoulder and continued to turn. Croft swore. He could not believe this was happening. He really had underestimated her. She pushed his head towards the floor and he tried to stand up. Suddenly, she was pushing him in the same direction. He was upright for only a second before he fell backwards, Sarah's arm and body pushing him down. He hit the floor, and the air was knocked out of his body. Sarah still held his wrist, and now she used his arm to turn him over so that he was facing the floor. She picked up the wire that had fallen from his hand during the struggle and quickly used it to tie his hands together. Then she stood up and breathed deeply. "Are you okay, Sarah?" asked the detective. "I am fine, Dad," she replied. "Are you all right?" "Apart from a bit of a headache, I have never felt better," he replied. "I always knew that I had an amazing daughter," he continued. "But until tonight, I never knew how amazing you really are. I am so happy now that I paid for your Aikido courses. And I am so happy that I took the bullets out of the pistol," replied Sarah and smiled at her father. 3 days later, Sarah and her father were sitting on the grass at Leeds Castle. They had just eaten a picnic of sandwiches and wine, and they both felt relaxed and happy. It was a beautiful summer evening, and thousands of other people were sitting around them. They were all waiting for the start of the concert. "There was a time when I thought we would not be sitting here together tonight," said David as he put his arm around his daughter and hugged her. "Yes," agreed Sarah. "When Mrs. Croft came for me with the pistol and the dog, I did not know what to do. It is a good thing that she did not send Brutus in first. I think everything would have ended differently. Anyway, now that they are in prison, we can relax. I suppose that we will have to come back to Kent when they appear in court." "Yes," answered her father. "That will not be for several weeks yet, though. The police have a lot of work to do before that. They told me that they have found Evans's body in his car in London, just as Croft said. The pistol will have to be checked to see if it fired the bullet that killed him. They will also have to speak to all the Africans who were in the van." "I really feel sorry for them," said Sarah. "Presumably, they will all be sent back to the country that they came from." "I think so," replied the detective. "But perhaps some of them will be able to stay. We are so lucky to live in this country, are we not? And I am especially lucky. I have such a good life here, said Sarah as she hugged her father. And I have people who love me. Indeed you do, Sarah, said her father and smiled. Indeed you do.